It has been said that average people want you to stay average. Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now, for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Mike Harber.
Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast. Today is episode number 33. My name's Rick Morris, and I'm here co-hosting today with Paul Gustafson. How you doing, Paul?
Hey, Rick, good to be with you. 33, wow. Whose number do you think of when you think of 33?
Is that Larry? You got Larry Bird?
Larry Bird, yeah. So, wow, it's hard to believe that we're at episode 33 for season 2, but here we are, and it's been so much fun. I've really enjoyed just connecting with all our guests and having fun with you and Mike, and we've got another in-studio guest that we had last week, so it's going to be fun. We're going to have fun.
That's right. Today, we're going to dive into the 7 critical factors of Team Strong leadership, and we're going to be wrapping up what we've been talking about around resilience.
Resilience, it's a big one. You know, this is such an important topic. Mike brought it up last time. When you think about COVID, everything that we've gone through over the last 14 months, I mean, resilience is so critical for us. And let's not think that, you know, just because we've got vaccinations that it's all over. We know that there's still a struggle and a challenge. We know that we still need to be resilient. So helping us in this discussion today, we've got Mike Harber and Trudy Menke. Welcome, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Glad to be here. Fantastic.
Yeah, and I love Mike over your left shoulder, back shoulder. I forget who's on the right side, but I think it's Lombardi, but I know that's Lincoln back there. It's so distinguishable, and talk about resilience and everything that he had to go through. I heard somewhere that Lincoln, you know, he wasn't an easy candidate to elect and get into the seat of the White House. He had a lot of failures along the way, but he just kept persisting, and he got there. He was very resilient. So
gives us all hope, right?
Yeah.
At least it does for me, because, like, look, man, I've had a ton of failures in my own life too.
Yeah. So very cool. So
yeah,
Rick,
we're so
I'm
thankful
ready.
we're so thankful to have Trudy with us. And, you know, Trudy, we wanted you to share a story that you have centered around Bonnie St. John that really sets the stage for our discussion today. So love for you to share that with us.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled that, you know, a few years ago, I had an opportunity to work alongside Bonnie St. John for a while and get to know her a little bit. And her life is really the story of resilience. You know, she is an author, a speaker, and a former Paralympic downhill skier. She's the first African-American to win medals in the Winter Paralympic competition as a ski racer, and the first African-American to medal in any Paralympic event. And when she was 5 years old, Bonnie had her right leg amputated below the knee. And despite these challenges, she went on to excel as an athlete, a scholar, a mother, and a businesswoman. After she graduated from Harvard and earned a Rhodes Scholarship, Bonnie St. John went on to a successful corporate career, first in sales with IBM, and then as a corporate consultant and an author. She's written 6 books, including one she wrote with her daughter, Darcy, and one she wrote with her husband, Alan P. Haynes. Her whole life is just a wonderful story of persevering and overcoming obstacles that really started with her in her youth, I think, and gave her that mental muscle, as Mike has mentioned in the past. A great quote from her is, she says, quote, "Because I'm a one-legged, black, short woman, I had to spend every day of my life pushing against what society told me I should be. I had to sell my value every day of my life. Confidence is what enables us to push back on reality. And once you get good at that, you can use it to live your joy."
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that story. Joy is really something that I feel from Bonnie St. John. I had an opportunity
Yes.
to interview her for the Transformational Leader podcast, right? Which we still are. We went from Transformational Leader podcast to Breaking Average, but had an opportunity to sit down and interview her, and she was so gracious. But that, I think the word that really sticks out, even in her own quote, was this joy for life. I mean, she really has a way to instill joy. And I'd love to hear from you, Mike. What do you think about this? And welcome, partner. Welcome. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's cool to play a little different role this week. In this episode, we're talking about perseverance, the three elements, Rick, and I wanted to kind of just highlight those for a minute. I'm going to tie them back to that quote that Trudy shared with us from Bonnie. First, we have to acknowledge, right? Acknowledge the threats, which is what Bonnie did. Hey, I'm short, I'm black, I've got one leg. I mean, she's kind of acknowledging that, and then what society throws at her. So she's acknowledging what is out there. She's persevering through the middle. So there's that reality, right? Acknowledge the reality there, and then persevere from that place through the middle. And then now in this episode, we're going to talk about overcoming. And I don't really like the word overcome as much as I do what overcome means. It means I won. You know, Bonnie won the gold medal, right? That's really what overcome means. We've acknowledged those threats. We've persevered through the middle, and now we've overcome. We've won the medal, the championship. We've experienced the prize, so to speak.
Absolutely, Mike. And the thing we're going to focus on today is that overcoming piece. And, that means overcoming means just carrying it out to completion. And it means going beyond your self-perceived limitations, refusing to settle for average, right? Breaking average, and taking it as far as you can go. There's an old African proverb that says, smooth seas do not make skillful sailors. So I love the imagery of that, right? It's the perseverance that makes the skill.
Yeah. And as we talk about Bonnie, I kind of start to think back a little bit about how we even had a chance to meet her. And I really want to make a challenge to the audience. We've gotten a chance to hear these stories and to meet some incredible people because you, the audience, got involved and you had a connection. Maybe you wanted to meet Bonnie yourself, or maybe you knew Bonnie, but somebody actually went into breakingaveragepodcast.com/leader and gave us the information to contact Bonnie. And next thing you know, she's winning a transformational leader award with John Maxwell. And that's happened several times. That's how we got to know Dr. Daniel Amen as well. And a lot of these incredible leaders. So please, if you know somebody that we should be talking to or highlighting who could really, our audience could benefit from hearing their wisdom, please go to breakingaveragepodcast.com/leader and fill out that form for us.
Yeah, amen to that. We would love to hear their stories, and we're so thankful for those that are sponsors for our show, and this for this whole series we've been highlighting one key sponsor. And Mike, why don't you share again with everybody who our sponsor is for this episode?
Yeah, Paul, always a pleasure to talk about our sponsors for the show. And, same sponsor we had last week, but we wanted to re-highlight him because of what he means for the Breaking Average book as a contributing author, his story around courage and perseverance and overcoming himself. And he's had some of his challenges in his life, right? But Dave Cornell is a great person. He contributed a lot to this book, and he helps leaders really overcome, which is what we're talking about today, Paul. In this episode, helps leaders overcome their limiting beliefs, overcome their challenges. And you can learn more about Dave at cultivatecourage.com, www.cultivatecourage.com.
I was listening to what you were saying, and I don't think, Rick, you haven't known me very long, but I don't think you knew that I was actually the person that nominated Bonnie St. John for that award because of the work I had done with her the year prior.
I was not aware of that. There you go.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah. Perfect story. But then you got the opportunity to work with her further, correct?
No, actually, my time with her was done the year prior. And when I got back connected to her, it was, are you the one that nominated me for this? She could not figure out how she got nominated for that award. And she knew that she had been working alongside me for a while and that I was a John Maxwell team member. But our time together had ended, and I had thought, wow, what a great opportunity. I should nominate Bonnie. And at that point, I wasn't really in touch with her. So it was just kind of fun. It brought us back into each other's space. And of course, it just seemed like such a journey to know that she actually won.
Absolutely. And that's the cool part, right? But not only that, how we want to thank you because I was not aware of Bonnie until the award and didn't get a chance. I mean, there's so many people doing so many great things that there's a lot of people out there. Casey Crawford's another good one. Mike, I think you're the one that kind of nominated him and got him involved into the award. And I know that Barbara Gustafson is who nominated Dr. Amen. And these are all people now that we've gotten an opportunity to know and to hear from and to grow and to learn from. And it's all because somebody took that opportunity to fill out that form. So thanks for sharing that, Trudy. In the resource breaking average, we've got a lot of great tidbits in there, and a lot of them do come from Dave Cornell, why he's our in-kind sponsor here. But I want to start to get into what does this whole overcoming and the whole factor of resilience really mean and why it's important. So, Mike, I know you've got a ton of stuff to share around this. So why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
Yeah, I think I just want to correct one thing, Rick. Unfortunately, I didn't nominate Casey Crawford. I knew Casey, but didn't nominate him. I can't remember, Paul. It was some guy in North Carolina.
Doug.
Doug,
Grant.
yeah,
Doug Grant. Doug Grant, if you're listening,
so,
man, thank you for nominating
we'll just
Casey.
call him out. So there's all kinds of leaders across the country that know other leaders, and we just wanted to highlight Doug real quick and say, hey, yeah, just like Trudy, just like Doug, you can nominate somebody for this podcast to be an interview to share their story. But when we talk about this idea of why resilience is important, it boils down to this element: overcoming. Right? We never get to experience overcoming unless we've persevered, unless we've been resilient, unless we've kind of acknowledged where we're at. And Paul, I think earlier, had mentioned Thomas Edison, right? And he was asked once, Mr. Edison, why do you keep trying to make that light bulb when you continue to fail? And he said, the quote goes, young man, I haven't failed 10,000 times. I've simply learned 10,000 ways it didn't work. That's really what perseverance is. And we talk about Edison today because he overcome, right? He overcame all the challenges, he overcome all the failures. I don't know about you guys, but almost every technological tool I have in my business is an Apple. Right? I have my AirPods in my ear. I have an iPhone. I have a Mac computer. I have I this and I that. I have an Apple Watch on my wrist. And when we think about overcoming, Steve Jobs, right? He had to overcome being fired from Apple, the company he started, because he was failing in leadership. And he went and learned some new skills. He learned some new communication. That's why overcoming is so important, because we know Steve Jobs as the Apple, creator of Apple, right? Many people don't know the story of he was fired from his own company because he wasn't very good, but because he persevered, he overcame, he was brought back. He scaled and rescaled, I guess, Apple to become what it's known as today. So, Rick, I think that's why it's so important to understand this idea of overcoming and resilience.
And Trudy, let's hear your thoughts.
I guess my thoughts are a little coming from a personal place. Some of you know me well enough to know, I have a younger brother that had a real serious car accident 30 years ago. So he went through a traumatic brain injury, a 3-month coma. And, that whole feeling of overcoming and resilience and perseverance, not only was it meaningful to him, it's kind of like you break it out in the book, right? It's meaningful to the whole team, because all of us had to approach that situation with that perseverance and resilience and that nature of overcoming. So to me, it comes from a really personal example. And I like all of you, I have lots of examples, over a lifetime of what you might define as overcoming. But I was at a pretty young age when that happened, early 20s. And I mean, that really set the stage, I think, for looking for that and understanding overcoming and perseverance, maybe in a way that my peers didn't at that tender of an age, which of course, when I was 21, I thought I was wise beyond my years. But now looking back, I realized that was a tender age. So yeah, that's where I'm coming from. I think it's important for sure.
I think it's an incredible story. And I think again, we start talking about how many podcasts we could actually do about overcome stories and perseverance stories. I mean, there's a tremendous out there. Paul, why don't you offer some of your views?
Yeah, I love Trudy. Thank you for sharing that, because, I think this is a personal thing for all of us to overcome. I mean, that is such a drive, right? When we finally get there, we talked about the picture before, the man that's just chopping away at the granite, trying to get to the diamonds. When we finally get there, it is such an amazing feeling, but it's so hard to get there. We go through that messy middle. It's so difficult. But when we can overcome, when we get there, what joy it is to have that individually, if we're the ones that is persevering, but certainly for other people around us. It's why we love movies of perseverance. It's why Remember the Titans won in our little movie thing that we did a few months back, right? And we picked a lot of movies. When you think about it, what's the common denominator? It's about resilience. It's about perseverance, and Mike mentioned a movie in the last podcast, Hidden Figures. It's about perseverance. We talked about Harriet Tubman last time. It's about perseverance. And when we think about that, that's one of the factors. It's tied to resilience. We're ultimately can only tell that story if there's a story of overcoming. Like they got there, right? If Harriet Tubman hadn't found freedom, just that alone is worth a story of overcoming. But not only that, she went back and saved at least 70 other people to go through that. Saved them, every one of them. So I think it's pretty powerful. It's about maintaining hope in the midst of the mess. It's about standing at the finish line, just imagining yourself standing at that finish line and going back and saying, yes, I did it. And I think our imagination, when we paint that picture of ourselves crossing that line, it makes a big difference. We talked about we talked about Bonnie St. John and skiing. Same time that she didn't win the gold medal, Mike. She actually won the silver. I don't know, maybe it was the bronze medal. I can't remember which
it was a
medal
mix. He's got a silver and a couple bronze, or a bronze and a couple silvers. I can't recall.
It's still amazing. And she has that great line because she fell in that race, but a lot of other folks fell, including the gold winner. But she said, the only difference between me and the gold winner is that she got up faster. She was the quicker getter-upper, right? But she still overcame. I mean, she had one leg. She skied that thing, and most of us couldn't ski that, right? I remember in '84 watching the Winter Olympics. Phil and Steve Mayer, they're the top skiers in the United States, and they're standing up there, and they're interviewing one of the reporters, and he was interviewing Steve Mayer. So how do you, and I think Steve won a silver in that race. What do you do to prepare? And he says, actually, I imagine the whole race, and I imagine myself crossing that finish line. I imagine the whole thing. And I think that's so important is really imagining ourselves standing or getting through that finish line, completing the race, finishing strong, and then valuing all the things that we've learned along the way. When we really look at it, it's about that journey, valuing the things on our journey, and realizing that we're learning something along the way, and it allows us to get better, and it encourages others too. It's about realizing you're capable of more than you gave yourself credit for. That's what's so cool about this. We're capable of so much more than we think we can. And if we just continue to persevere, if we're resilient, then we can overcome. And that's what's so powerful about this whole story. And your brother, Trudy, that's just a great example. So how's he doing now?
He's doing well.
That's just
doing
amazing.
well. It's been more of his life after than before. So
yeah,
one of those markers though, people, it's that marker before and after,
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Rick? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I want to follow Trudy's lead and tell a little bit of a personal story. It's not necessarily my story, but it's one I'm very close to right now. And I love small world moments. You can call them God moments, universe moments, whatever you want to call them. But there's times where the timeline, and we talked about timelines, Paul, in the last podcast, that timeline kind of takes care of itself. But in December of this year, I got a phone call to take over a project that wasn't going well. And they had a launch date that they wanted to have January 1st. And it was for Brendan Bouchard. And Brendan, when I first met Brendan, he was upset because it was a huge revenue miss for them, because they were delaying releasing some planners because they had this app that they wanted to launch by January 1st. So it was a lot of stress and tension when I came in. And I was getting asked the questions that we talked about, in the last podcast: how fast can we get it done? How fast can we get it done? And so when we started to look at it, it looked like around an April or May launch. And so we decided in middle of April to launch it to about 5,000 beta users. And we're about 2 weeks into that. And Brendan calls me and he says, hey, it looks like we're going to be launching around May 19th was our goal. And he goes, I want to delay that a week to May 26. And I said, why is that? He goes, I was just talking with my wife. He goes, it's the 25-year anniversary of my accident. See, Brendan, he had broken up with a girlfriend. He had gotten this job. I believe I can't remember what the country was. Colombia, I think he was going to, and he was actually plotting his suicide. He actually was thinking of killing himself, and instead gets into a massive car accident. And he almost dies in that car accident. He says he remembers sitting in the hospital bed going, hey, this life thing's pretty cool, man. Like he was trying to think about how to die. And then he got close to it and he's like, wait a minute. And he got this new perspective. He had a couple of accidents. One, he had a traumatic brain injury, and he kind of had to reteach himself a lot of different things. And he got really interested in personal growth. And if you don't know Brendan, he wrote High Performing Habits. He's had a 25-year career now in personal growth. And he's got this new app called Growth Day, which by the time this podcast airs will have launched on the App Store, and you can go find it. It's an incredible app. But the point being is, had he launched in January, he would have missed this opportunity to where he literally can say this app launched on the 25-year anniversary of when my career in this decided to launch, into that one moment that he had to overcome to be able to do that. And to me, that whole story of overcoming, not only overcoming, the accident, but overcoming all of these challenges he's had to experience for the last 25 years in order to make a moment like this happen. And I've just been a small player into a big story, but I've gotten to watch this happen in that real vision of overcoming, and that real vision of driving forward is so cool to be a part of. And that's the story I wanted to share. Yeah. I want to pivot a little bit though, because we've been talking about, these personal stories and our thoughts, but how do we transfer this mindset to others? How do we start to get other people to really start to believe that they can overcome? And Mike, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, golly, man, this is a deep, deep topic, because I think the only way you transfer the idea of overcoming is similar to what you just shared, Rick. It's personal stories, right? It's what Trudy shared. It's personal stories. I don't know, maybe you guys, show of hands, how many of you often have looked at others and thought, man, I wish I had what they had. I wish I could do what they could do, right? I mean, that has held me back a lot in my life. And, I remember in 1998, I got out of the Army, and I wanted to do what I'm now doing today as in my business. Because in the Army, I was a trainer. I spoke. I was leading people that outranked me, teaching them leadership and all kinds of things that I do today. But when I got in 1998, I was young, and I didn't feel like my voice would be listened to. I didn't feel like I had the credibility. I had all of these limiting beliefs I had to overcome. And, I don't know if you all have limiting beliefs, but I had a bunch of them then, and I still do today. And I think the way we transfer the idea of overcoming is, one, I think we have to be, really honest about our own limiting things that we've overcome in our own life, and share those. Often leaders, many of the leaders I grew up watching, even my own parents, right? I knew they had like all these problems in their life, but they never acknowledged it, right? That, going back to the first element of this idea of perseverance, it's like, don't tell anybody. And so you kind of grow up, don't talk about your limits, don't talk about your failures, don't talk about your fears. And so you just kind of shove those things, but those become the very things that hold us back as a leader and as a team. And so I think, one, to transfer this knowledge, you've got to create awareness. You've got to create acknowledgement. You've got to, not that you want to stay stuck. And I want to go back to the movie Hidden Figures. There's a great scene in the movie. And Paul, you're probably better at this than I am. I don't know the names of the people in the movie, but there's a scene where the lady was running back and forth to the bathroom. Mm-hmm. And Kevin Costner's like, where in the bleep have you been? And she's like, well, there's no bathroom here for me. And what he did in that moment is he removed the labels. Mm. So what he did is he acknowledged it. And there's a scene in there where he removed the label for colored people only coffee. And then he takes a sledgehammer and he removed the label of whites only bathroom. I don't know if y'all remember that scene if you haven't seen that, right? But the way I think the most powerful way to transfer this idea of overcoming is someone has to lead. The leader has to leave, acknowledge the limits, but remove them. Don't leave people stuck there, right? Find a way to take a sledgehammer to those limiting beliefs and say, hey, here's how I've done it in my own life. Here's some failures I've had, but here's what I've done to overcome them. And I'm going to help you remove them as well. I'm going to remove those labels. I'm going to remove those limits. That's my job as a leader. Now let's go. Let's go take that hill. Let's go, accomplish the goal that we're trying to accomplish. And I could talk for hours and hours about this. I get pretty fired up, but Rick, that's kind of my thoughts on how we transfer that.
And speaking of overcoming, Mike, I believe that you were down on that movie when we went through that. I'll have to go back and watch the podcast. And now you've overcome that opinion of that movie and now is in love with it.
Well, only because I hadn't fully watched the movie. I'd seen bits and pieces of it, but I finally sat and watched it from start to finish. And I'm going to go back and watch it again because it moved me. It was I really have watched it from the beginning to the end now, and it moved me and made an impact on me. So yeah, it's a fantastic movie that really ties into this overcoming mentality or topic that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Trudy, why don't you share with us some of your strategies?
Mike, I just got to speak to what you just said about, the parents and personalities and people who are just like not necessarily acknowledging and kind of shutting it down. I got some good, strong German heritage. That's like the way of the world, you just like hold it together and, shove it down. But I've come to believe that whole process of shoving it down is like an anchor, right? It just all settles and holds you back. So, as far as a strategy and what I think you can do to, you're trying to kind of sell people on the concept of overcoming. And I always feel like you got to sell to the objection, right? So people struggle with this thought that they could ever accomplish something. And I think one of the pieces that we maybe don't speak to as often is that overcoming is not linear. It's kind of, it's like this, right? And I've totally witnessed that in my brother's, decades of recovery and all that has to go on. So one of the things we found was that physically, as he was coming back into his own to some degree, had a lot of things to overcome there. But when he would do something once, we would be like, okay, good, now we're there. Now he's there, he can do that. But odds are the next day he couldn't do it. So we flipped the script, right? It became, well, he did it once, he'll do it again. Instead of having that mandate, well, you did it once, now you got to do it every day. You've got to be able to succeed at this all the time. Sometimes it was like those wires were just firing for the first time and it worked. But then it took a while for all that wiring to totally connect. So it was, it was a process. And I think if we look at overcoming as not being linear, we can accept some of the jolts, the back and forth that comes with persevering. So
yeah, I love that quote. I love that quote of you did it once, now he'll do it again. That's such a great quote.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah,
Paul? I love that. Yeah, because what came to mind when Trudy was sharing, we've talked about it before, but Alex Smith, remember what happened to him, and totally almost losing his leg, coming back and being able to play the game. He just retired, and we wish him well. And Alex Smith, thank you for just your story of inspiration. But you overcame. You were faced with a challenge, and other people, the external folks, said you couldn't, you shouldn't, I wouldn't. And somebody put a football in your hand, and you said, well, what if I can? And you stepped forward, and you went through that. And that's really what we have as an opportunity. As leaders, we have that opportunity to put the football in somebody else's hand and says, yeah, you can. Paint this picture. Paint the picture of you overcoming, right? Belief drives behavior. Right? If you can cast belief and create belief in somebody, then we're going to see a behavior where folks overcome. Your brother's an example of that, Trudy. There are other examples too. And so I really believe that we have the opportunity to cast that belief. It starts with our values. What are our values? And when we can share those values and share what we really believe in. Martin Luther King shared that, right? I have a dream. He was saying, I believe that this can happen. And it creates pursuit. And so communicate belief. and communicate boundaries too. I think it's important to have boundaries because that way we can kind of stay focused. You know, Bonnie's got that great book she wrote a couple years ago called Micro Resilience. It ties in perfectly, and she talks about 5 different areas that we can be resilient about, starting with refocusing on our brain, resisting what she calls primitive alarms. It's about boundaries, reframing our attitude. What a power that is when we have the right attitude and the right mindset going into something. How we can stay fresh, refreshing our body, and how we can renew our spirit, because I think that's so important. So I encourage you guys to go check out Bonnie's book, Micro Resilience, because that'll unpack some more. But I think those 3 things that I started with too: communicate belief, communicate boundaries, and celebrate the small wins. I think if we do those 3 things, we can transfer this. We can transfer this, and we can make an impact. So, Rick,
Absolutely.
what are your thoughts, buddy?
Yeah. So when I start talking about, project management, it's mindset, right? It's mindset. But one of my favorite things is every single project, no matter what, is going to hit some sort of wall. It's going to hit a technical issue or a money issue or a time issue or something, but it's coming. And what I live for is what I dub the breakthrough moment. It's the moment where you overcome that obstacle and now you can see the finish line. And the thing is what I've learned to do is to search for it, to seek it. And I actually explain to people in the beginning of a project now, I tell them that, look, there's going to be a moment where we feel like this isn't going to happen, that we're not going to be able to deliver. And I can't wait for that day, because I can't wait to see what solution you come up with, right? I predispose them that we're going to have these issues, and we seek it out, knowing that there's going to be something that we have to overcome, because if it was easy, everybody would do it. And we're trying to do things that are hard. One of my favorite stories about that, and another way that I shifted that thought, because the way I shifted that thought was it's not just about finding it now, it's about celebrating it with the team. And so I did a project a couple of years ago. It was a Mickey Mouse Club 30-year reunion. First of all, we never thought it would happen, because you've got 35 people that have gone on to their lives and other areas and aspects, some very successful, some doing corporate jobs, some are stay-at-home moms, right? To try to align all of their interests. And the biggest fear is that they didn't want to do something that was cheesy or looked stupid, right? Right. So how do you create this reunion and this experience for fans where you can bring all of these people back together? But we just kept pushing, and we wanted to do a 20-year reunion. It fell through. A 25-year reunion. It fell through. And so this is the 30th year reunion that we're pulling this together. And I remember we went to Orlando, we're scouting locations, and they showed us this Epcot Pavilion Center, and it was huge, Paul. At the time, I'm thinking about renting out BB King's, and hopefully we can get 150 people to show up, right? But as things just kept going and kept going and kept going, it grew to, we almost had, I think, 5,000 people there. We got dovetailed into a MegaCon, which is part of Orlando. We happened to pick the same weekend as MegaCon, this huge convention. We thought that was going to be the end of it for us, and it turns out we found a way to pivot and become part of that panel. Ended up hosting the largest panel interview, the most attended panel interview, including the reuniting of the characters from Back to the Future and the Goonies. We had more people in our audience than any of those. But I remember it's now nighttime. We've gotten everybody over to the Epcot Pavilion, the same one that we all walked into, and said, there's no possible way we can fill this out. And I pulled the whole production team together, and I said, just look for a second. Just take a moment and breathe and look at this room, because it was packed and it was huge. It was filled. And I was like, you did this. All of you did this. We never thought A, it could happen, B, that we would get anybody to attend, and C, that we could ever fill this pavilion. But you did this. Like, take a picture, just take a step back, take a minute to yourselves, moment of silence, just watch. And this was like at the height of everything. And I've learned to take that forward. So now it's not only about seeking the breakthrough moment, but it's also making them to see that they overcame, and to remember that feeling, and to store everything, because we'll tend to celebrate and then move on. But we need to take that same stock and breathe for a moment and just look at what we overcame, whatever it is, the little things. You didn't eat the piece of chocolate cake that was going to throw you, Mike. Overcame it, right? Now we can look at it. To you, it's the Fanta sodas, if I remember, the orange crushes or something that'll get Mike. And the day that he can walk by it, right, he overcame. But take that moment to celebrate, I think, is so important.
I love that. That's so good. Yeah, this is such a great topic, Rick. I'm so glad that we have Trudy and Mike on this, talking about overcoming, because, there's somebody that's watching or listening that needs to be reminded that they can overcome whatever challenge that they're facing. Look, we've all gone through challenges. If you're watching, you're like, yeah, I've got a challenge. You can overcome this. Don't give up. Find somebody else that you can lean into. When we talk about transferring it, we're talking about really finding somebody that can encourage you and be accountable, help you, support you, pray for you, whatever it is. Don't go alone. So, we invite you to go to our website, by the way, and share with us, a little bit about your story, and maybe a story of overcoming that you have. We'd love to hear those stories. It'd be great. And, one person that's helped me overcome is our sponsor, Dave Cornell, Cultivate Courage. And he's out there to support you too. So if you need some help, there's lots of good folks here that can help you. We've got Trudy as an in-studio guest. She can help you. You've got Mike. He's a coach. He can help you. Rick can help you. We're here to help you as well. So feel free to reach out. Dave Cornell is a fantastic person. If you've got some fear, some apprehension, he can help you deal with that. That's what he does. That's his specialty. So again, thank you, Dave, for being our sponsor today, cultivatecourage.com.
Yeah, and if you're on the web and looking at cultivatecourage.com, then you can just bounce right on over to breakingaverage.com. Paul does a great job of putting some blog posts out there to help you overcome, help you see things, help you learn about the topics that we're discussing. Plus, there's that form you can fill out to introduce us to a great leader like everybody here has. I think it's time now, though, to start to close out our podcast and get to one of our favorite parts, Paul, and that's our tip and challenge.
I love the tip and challenge. It's been so good. So I'm really curious to see what Mike and Trudy have to say to kind of wrap us up. But I want to just kind of leave a tip and challenge that really hit me this week. Have you guys ever heard of Anne Frank?
Of course.
Yeah, amazing story. I don't have time to unpack it. Maybe we'll do that in a future podcast. But real quick, she was captured by the Nazis back in, during the occupation of the Netherlands. But for 2 years, she kind of hid away, and she wrote this diary, and it's phenomenal. Talk about perseverance, which we talked about in our last podcast. But there's a couple quotes from her writings that I think are really powerful that I just wanted to share today. And one, when Trudy was sharing, this one kind of came up to me in my mind. This thought that, what a wonderful thought. And this is I read this last week, and I was sharing this with somebody who was almost 70, and because they were wondering, what's left? My life is over. Well, no, we still have plenty of time on the clock. Or if we're still breathing, we'll still have an opportunity for influence. And the quote from Anne Frank is, what a wonderful thought it is that some of our best days of our lives haven't happened yet. And so no matter what challenge you're facing, just remember that the best days of your life haven't happened yet. You still have an opportunity. Hang in there. Keep fighting. Keep fighting. And I also love this other quote from her. And this is, I'm going to start with the challenge. Keep fighting. Here's the tip. Don't wait. Don't wait. Her quote, this is the quote that really shares this tip, right? How wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. You and I have a chance to improve the world today. Don't wait. So that's my tip and challenge. How about you, Rick?
Yeah, I love that. And love Anne Frank as well. I think my tip is to visualize. One of the things that I started to do in coaching as well as my career is when somebody's explaining a problem to me, I ask them to tell me what it looks like when they're done with it, when they solved it. What is it on the other side? So, if somebody's trying to overcome a weight challenge like I have, the visualization of, well, what is it going to be? What is it going to feel like when you stand on the scale and see the number that you're shooting for? What is it going to feel like when we get past this problem? Like, tell me what it looks like when we're done, so that there's that visualization and manifestation of that. I think the challenge then is to tell the story. I think the way that we transfer is by hearing these stories and hearing the right story sometimes of somebody else overcoming something similar to you is what's really going to propel that person to be able to overcome their challenges. So I think my challenge then is just tell the story, share the story of overcoming with people, inspire other people, and make sure that we're sharing these experiences. That's what this whole podcast is about. And it's what I think can give that person the right push to be able to overcome any challenges. Mike, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just a couple thoughts I had. Paul said, don't wait. I mentioned earlier, that in 1998, I got out of the Army and I wanted to do what I do today, but I waited for 13 years. I didn't really start doing what I'm doing until 2011. So I put that dream on the back burner, right on the shelf for 13 years. And, this is a passion for me. I love what I do. I get up every day loving it, not dreading it, right? Some people get up and dread going to work. I actually, I work 24/7 and it doesn't feel like work because I love what I do. But also Ralph Waldo Emerson said, the greatest glory in life is not in never failing, but rising every time we fall. And I think that's what the essence of overcoming is. I talked about overcoming is it's about winning, having that winning mentality. What happens when I win? And I think that quote, Paul, that you put in the book really kind of espouses that idea.
Yeah, I love that.
Thank you, Mike. Trudy, any closing thoughts?
Just going back to the word itself, the concept of overcoming, right? So, we might say things like, I'm coming after you, or go for it, and come and go. Those are words of action. But over usually either means over the top, like even more, or it means done. And I think we got to make sure we know what word we're defining, right? Because it's not done, it's over the top. So when we're overcoming, it's this movement and direction, like it's over the top, we're coming at you, and that's how we're going to persevere. So that's just, I love words. I like to kind of pull them apart and think about all those nuances. And that's how I was kind of digesting that word as I was listening to all you guys with your tips and challenges. So.
Wow. Yeah. Trudy, I love that. Mike, what great insight, both you guys. Rick, good tip and challenge too. I think this has been real powerful. Hopefully I believe, Rick, for sure that we've encouraged somebody today. And if you feel encouraged, if you're watching online, just put that in there. How have you been encouraged today? Because your encouragement might encourage somebody else. So we want to invite you to not only put your comments on there, but feel free to visit us and certainly visit our sponsor today, Dave Cornell at Cultivating Courage as well. But hopefully this has been an impact. Rick, I've enjoyed this tremendously. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation, Paul. And I'm kind of digging chair number one here. So Mike might have to wrestle me for that coming on out. But no, it's been a great topic again for Breaking Average, this whole portion on resilience. If you're just picking up the podcast now, this was kind of part 3 of us talking about resilience. And I think there's just valuable nuggets everywhere. So you can go back and listen on breakingaverage.com or your favorite podcast, or see us on YouTube, as well as the Empowered Living Show. But once again, we're inspired by our mission of leadership and breaking average, and we will see you on the next podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. This show was produced by R Squared Multimedia. A special thank you to Milestone Melodies for our theme music. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.